In a quiet southern town where everybody seems to know everybody, justice isn't always blind. It just looks the other way. One late afternoon, Henry Lawson, a 50-year-old black man, walks home from his shift at the auto repair shop. His hands are greasy, his back aches, but his spirit is calm. He carries a small paper bag with dinner inside, fried chicken from the corner diner where the waitress always calls him Sir. A police cruiser slows down beside him. Two officers inside glance his way. A dispatch crackles over the radio. Suspicious male, possibly armed, black hoodie, heading east on Pine Street. Henry happens to be on Pine Street. Within seconds, the officers step out, hands on their weapons. Henry raises his palms, confused but polite. "Evening, officers? Is something wrong?" His voice trembles with that cautious respect every black man in America learns by heart. The younger cop narrows his eyes, seeing not a man, but a suspect. He barks orders. The older one hesitates, unsure. Henry tries to explain that he's just coming from work, that he's lived in this town his whole life, but no one listens. When Henry moves to show his ID, the officer panics. The next moment, a burst of pepper spray fills the air. Henry stumbles, coughing, blinded. The paper bag falls, chicken scatters on the sidewalk. Someone across the street films everything on a phone. Within hours, the video floods social media. Outrage rises. The town, so used to its quiet, now trembles with noise. Hashtags, protests, and shame. And that's when the twist begins. Because the man on that video, the one gasping for air, humiliated before strangers, isn't just another face in the headlines. He's the father of the city's police chief, Derek Lawson, a man who built his career promising to bring integrity and equality to the badge. Derek hasn't spoken to his father in years. Their last conversation ended with slammed doors and silence. But now, his father's name echoes through the department halls, attached to a scandal that could destroy everything Derek stands for. Caught between loyalty and conscience, between his badge and his blood, Derek must decide, will he protect his men or defend the man who raised him? In the end, the story isn't just about a mistake on Pine Street. It's about a son facing the truth he's spent his whole life avoiding, that justice means nothing until it starts at home. Before we go any further, I want to know where you're watching from. Write down in the comments your city and country. I'm genuinely curious to see how far this story travels. From New York to Nairobi, from London to Los Angeles. Every view, every comment reminds me that stories like this connect us across the world. So tell me, where on this planet are you hearing Henry's story? Let's see if this message of justice and dignity can reach all four corners of the earth. The sun hung low over Magnolia Falls, a small southern town where the air always smelled of fried food and gasoline. The streets were calm, almost sleepy, a place where people waved from their porches, and everyone claimed to know everyone else. But some faces were only ever seen, never truly known. Henry Lawson, 50 years old, walked along Pine Street with the steady rhythm of a man who'd worked with his hands his entire life. His blue mechanic's shirt was stained from the day's labor, the name patch faded after years in the sun. In one hand, he carried a brown paper bag from Rosie's Diner. Inside, 2 pieces of fried chicken, a biscuit, and a slice of peach pie for later. The world was quiet except for the buzz of streetlights waking up and the hum of a distant radio playing old soul music. Henry smiled faintly. He'd promised himself he'd eat healthier this year, but some promises could wait until tomorrow. As he passed the First Baptist Church, a police cruiser rolled to a stop at the corner. The black and white car gleamed under the amber light. Henry didn't pay much attention. Cops came and went all the time in Magnolia Falls. He'd fixed enough of their cars at the shop to know half of them by name. Inside the cruiser, 2 officers watched. Officer Ryan Keats, young, restless, and eager to prove himself, leaned forward. "That him?" he muttered. His partner, Officer Barnes, shrugged. "Matches the call. Black male, dark clothes, walking east on Pine." They pulled to the curb. Henry turned, puzzled but polite. "Evening, officers. Something wrong?" His tone was calm, that careful, respectful rhythm that generations of black men had mastered for survival. Keats stepped closer, hand on his belt. "Let's see some ID." Henry blinked. "Sure thing, but what's this about?" "Just do it," Keats snapped. Henry reached slowly into his pocket, but the young cop's nerves twitched. The radio on his shoulder buzzed again. "Possible suspect armed." Keats's pulse spiked. Henry's voice softened. "Easy now, son. I ain't got—" A spray hissed. Burning filled the air. Henry staggered backward, clutching his face as his dinner spilled across the sidewalk. The paper bag tore open. The peach pie slid into the gutter. People on porches froze. A woman gasped. Someone started recording. Through the blur of pain, Henry could hear his own heartbeat, loud as thunder. He dropped to his knees, blinded, humiliated. One more man mistaken for something he never was. And far away, in a polished office downtown, Chief Derek Lawson's phone began to ring. The morning after, Magnolia Falls woke up to a different kind of silence, the kind that hangs heavy before a storm. At Rosie's Diner, the same place where Henry had bought his dinner, the TV behind the counter flickered with the morning news. A grainy cell phone video played on loop. A black man on his knees, blinded by pepper spray, his hands trembling in surrender. The reporter's voice carried over the sizzle of the grill. Another confrontation between police and a local resident sparks outrage. Customers stared. Some shook their heads. Others turned away. Rosie, the owner, whispered, "That looks like Henry." No one answered, but everyone knew. Across town, at the Magnolia Falls Police Department, the air was thick with murmurs. Officer Keats sat at his desk, pale and sweating. His partner Barnes avoided eye contact. On the screen in front of them, the same video had already racked up 20,000 views overnight, the comments section burning like wildfire. Not again. Justice for Henry. This town never changes. Chief Derek Lawson hadn't arrived yet. His name was trending, not because of what he'd done, but because of who the man in the video was rumored to be. Inside the modest hospital room, Henry lay awake. His eyes were swollen, his breathing slow. A nurse dabbed his face with a wet cloth, whispering, "You're lucky, Mr. Lawson. Could have been worse." Henry didn't answer. He stared at the ceiling, the hum of the fluorescent light echoing in his mind. His dignity hurt more than his skin. On the small table beside him sat the brown bag from last night, torn, greasy, but still holding one crushed biscuit. The smell made him sick. Then the door creaked open. A local reporter peeked in, phone in hand. "Mr. Lawson, can we talk? Is it true your son works for the police department?" Henry's jaw tightened. He turned his head away. No comment. Outside, the protest had already begun. A handful of residents held signs on the courthouse steps. No justice, no peace. Teenagers streamed live videos. Someone spray-painted "Remember Henry" on the police station wall. In a nearby conference room, Chief Lawson's secretary placed a folder on his desk, marked urgent. Inside were screenshots of the video, the social media posts, and one simple line highlighted in red: "Victim identified as Henry Lawson, possible relation to Chief Derek Lawson." The chief hadn't even seen the video yet, but the world already had. And somewhere between the screens and the whispers, a father's humiliation was about to become a son's reckoning. Chief Derek Lawson walked into the station just before 8 a.m., coffee in one hand, phone in the other, completely unaware that his morning was about to collapse. The mood was different. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Eyes followed him as he passed the bullpen, a silence that didn't belong in a police department. "Morning," Derek said flatly, nodding to the front desk. No one replied. He pushed open the door to his office. His assistant, Marta, looked nervous. "Sir," she began carefully, you might want to sit down." He frowned. "Why? What's going on?" She turned the laptop toward him. The paused frame of a viral video filled the screen. The image of a black man on the ground, his hands covering his face, surrounded by two officers. A bystander's voice in the background shouted, "He didn't do anything." Derek felt his stomach twist. "What am I looking at?" Marta hesitated. "That's the video everyone's talking about. Happened on Pine Street last night. Local man named Henry Lawson." The name hit like a bullet. Derek froze. His voice turned low and sharp. "What did you say?" "Henry Lawson, sir. The man in the video." He leaned closer to the screen. Even with the blur, even through the shaking camera, he knew. The shape of the shoulders, the gray in the beard, the way the man tried to stay calm. It was unmistakable. It was his father. "Who were the responding officers?" Derek asked, his throat tight. "Keats and Barnes," Marta replied quietly. He stood, jaw clenched. "Get them in here. Now." Minutes later, the two officers entered, fidgeting like schoolboys waiting for detention. Keats spoke first, defensive. "Chief, before you say anything," he matched the suspect description. "We followed procedure." "Procedure," Derek repeated. "You sprayed an unarmed man who wasn't resisting," Barnes interjected. "Sir, with respect, the report said possibly armed." "Possibly," Derek snapped. "So you assumed guilt." Keats crossed his arms. Look, we didn't know who he was. Derek's voice went cold. You didn't need to. You only needed to know he was human. For a moment, no one spoke. The hum of the air conditioner filled the room. Derek took a slow breath, steadying himself. Both of you, suspended. Effective immediately. Turn in your badges. Keats blinked. Sir, that's not fair. Neither was last night. Derek cut him off. As they left, Marta stood quietly by the door. Derek sank into his chair, staring at the frozen video frame of his father on the screen, a man he hadn't called in over 6 years. The world was watching now, and so was his conscience. For the first time in years, Chief Derek Lawson didn't feel like the man in charge. The badge on his chest suddenly felt heavier, colder. He sat alone in his office, the blinds half closed, watching the morning sunlight carve lines across the desk, like the lines time had drawn across his own life. On the screen, the video replayed silently. Each frame felt like a confession. The man being shoved, the pepper spray, the trembling hands, all of it was burned into his mind. Every blink of that footage pulled him backward in time. He remembered his father, Henry Lawson, standing in the front yard of their small paint-chipped house. Derek had been 18, suitcase in hand, full of ambition and anger. You'll see, Pop, he had said. One day, I'll be the man who changes all this. Henry had just looked at him, quiet but firm. Change starts inside you, son. Don't forget where you came from. But he had forgotten, or tried to. Derek left for the academy, then the city, chasing promotions and respect. Along the way, he built walls. Walls made of distance, silence, and excuses. Phone calls turned into text messages. Then the text messages stopped altogether. His father became a memory he could manage, something to tuck away while wearing the uniform, until now. A knock broke his thoughts. It was Marta again. Sir, the mayor's office is on line 2. They want a statement before noon. Derek rubbed his temples. Tell them I'm reviewing the case. And, sir, Marta hesitated. The hospital called. Your father's awake. The words hung in the air like a sentence. He didn't respond right away. He just stared at the screensaver flickering on his laptop, his department's motto, in blue and gold. Integrity above all. A hollow laugh escaped him. Integrity, he whispered. Yeah. He stood, buttoning his jacket, the motion mechanical. As he looked in the mirror near the door, he caught a glimpse of himself. Sharp suit, clean badge, cold eyes, the kind of man his father used to warn him about becoming. Downstairs he walked past officers pretending not to stare. Every whisper seemed to follow him. That's his dad. That's the guy from the video. He didn't correct them, didn't speak. Just walked out of the station, past the parked patrol cars, into the blinding sunlight of Magnolia Falls. The same street where his father had fallen. The same ground that now demanded his reckoning. The hospital sat on a hill above Magnolia Falls, its white walls gleaming under the late morning sun. Derek had driven there hundreds of times before, for briefings, for press conferences, for photo ops with injured officers. But this time, every step toward those glass doors felt like walking into a confession booth. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and distant coffee. Nurses moved briskly through the halls. Derek's badge caught the light as he walked, but today it brought no respect, only curious, heavy stares. He stopped at the information desk. Henry Lawson, what room? The clerk hesitated, looking up. Recognition flickered in her eyes. Room 214, she said softly. He's stable. Each number on the hallway door felt like a countdown. 210, 211, 212. His hand trembled when he reached the last one. For a moment, he just stood there, listening to the faint beeping of a heart monitor through the door. Then he knocked. A tired voice answered. Come in. Derek stepped inside. Henry lay in bed, eyes swollen but open, a thin band of gauze still resting across his cheek. The TV in the corner played the same video on mute, his humiliation on repeat. When Henry saw his son, he didn't smile. He just stared, unreadable. Didn't expect to see you so soon, he said, his voice rough. Derek swallowed. Dad, I didn't know. I didn't know it was you. Henry gave a dry laugh. You think it would have mattered? The silence stretched between them, years of unspoken things filling the space. Derek pulled a chair closer. It does matter. I should have been there. I should have... Henry cut him off. You should have called. That would have been a start. Derek looked down, ashamed. You raised me better than this. I raised you to see people, Henry said, voice low. Not badges, not colors, just people. Outside the window, a small group of protesters held signs, their chants muffled by the glass. Derek stared at them, then back at his father. It's getting bad out there. People are angry. Henry's eyes didn't waver. They should be. He paused, then added quietly, "This town won't change until the men in charge stop pretending they don't see what's right in front of them." Derek wanted to argue, but couldn't. Every word hit home. When he finally stood to leave, Henry said one last thing, the kind of line that stays with a man long after he walks away. "Son, you wear that badge for everyone's father. Don't forget that mine still bleeds." Derek turned toward the door, his heart pounding heavier than the echo of his boots. By the time Chief Derek Lawson returned to the station, the air outside was heavy with humidity and judgment. News vans lined the curb. Reporters called out his name as he passed, their microphones flashing like weapons. "Chief Lawson, is it true the victim is your father? Are the officers suspended? Did your department try to cover this up?" He didn't answer a single one, just kept walking, jaw tight, steps steady. Inside, the lobby buzzed with tension. Even the dispatchers spoke in whispers now. Marta met him at the elevator, clutching a folder. "Sir, the mayor's waiting upstairs. He's not in a good mood." "Neither am I," Derek muttered. When he entered the conference room, Mayor Charles Dillard was already pacing, his face red with irritation. Beside him sat City Attorney Linda Carver, scrolling through a tablet. The local press conference banner still hung from the last community trust event they'd held together. Dillard didn't waste time. "Derek, this is a nightmare. I've got state officials breathing down my neck, activists outside City Hall, and your officers on leave. Tell me how we fix this." "By telling the truth," Derek said quietly. The mayor scoffed. "The truth? The truth is a video that's destroying this town's image. We can't afford that." Linda looked up from her tablet. "We need to control the narrative before this gets political. Maybe issue a statement saying it's under investigation. No admissions, no details." Derek frowned. "You want me to lie?" "Not lie," Linda said, her tone corporate calm. "Just manage." Derek leaned forward, voice low. "That man on the ground, the one everyone's talking about, is my father. You think I'm going to manage that?" The mayor's eyes widened slightly. "So it's true." He exhaled through his nose. "Damn it, Derek. That makes it worse. Conflict of interest, bias, emotional involvement. The press will eat that alive." Derek straightened his posture. "Then let them. I'll handle the investigation myself." "No," Linda cut in. "That would look like favoritism. You'll have to recuse yourself." "Recuse?" Derek repeated. "You're asking me to step aside while someone else buries this case?" Dillard slammed his hand on the table. "I'm asking you to protect the department. And your career." The room went still. Derek took a slow breath, eyes cold. "My career stopped mattering the moment you sprayed an old man in the face and called it policy." He turned toward the door, ignoring their protests. As he walked out, the mayor muttered to Linda, "He's going to make this personal." She sighed. "It already is." Outside, chants from the protest reached the windows. The city was choosing sides, and Derek Lawson was running out of time to choose his. The sky turned grey over Magnolia Falls, the kind of cloudy afternoon that felt like it was holding its breath. From his office window, Chief Derek Lawson could see the protesters gathering outside the station, their signs swaying in the wind like restless ghosts. "Justice for Henry. End the silence. No more excuses." Each chant echoed inside his chest. He wasn't just hearing their anger. He was feeling his father's humiliation all over again. His phone buzzed non-stop. Reporters, city officials, even his own officers. But he ignored every call. Instead, he sat at his desk, staring at his badge, that small golden shield that once meant pride and purpose. Now it felt like a confession of guilt. He whispered to himself, "When did this stop being about protecting people?" The knock on the door was hesitant. It was Marta, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. She set one down gently. "You should eat something," she said softly. He gave a faint smile. "I'm not hungry." She hesitated, then added, "Sir, the department's divided. Some think you're doing the right thing. Others say you're letting emotions cloud your judgment." Derek chuckled dryly. "They think justice is emotional. They think loyalty is," she replied carefully. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Loyalty to what? The badge? The silence?" Marta's eyes softened. "You can't change the whole system overnight." "I don't want overnight," Derek said, his voice low but fierce. "I just want one day where a man like my father can walk home without being treated like a suspect." The room fell silent again. Only the sound of rain beginning to fall outside filled the space. Derek picked up his badge and turned it over in his hand. He remembered the day he earned it. His father sitting proudly in the audience at the graduation ceremony. Henry had worn a suit that didn't quite fit, but his smile did. After the ceremony, Derek had said, "I'll make you proud, Pop." Henry had answered, "Then remember what that badge stands for, not what they'll tell you it does." Now, years later, those words burned like a wound reopening. Marta interrupted gently. "Sir, the press wants a statement by 5 o'clock. The mayor's office insists you read from their notes." Derek slid the badge into his pocket. "Tell the mayor I'll write my own." When she left, he turned back to the window. The crowd outside was growing, umbrellas forming a sea of movement under the rain. He could almost hear his father's voice in the storm. "You can't fix what you refuse to face." And for the first time in years, Derek realized maybe it wasn't just his father who had been waiting for him to come home. By late afternoon, the storm had grown louder. Thunder rolled above the police station like an omen. Inside, Chief Derek Lawson stood before the mirror in his private restroom, tying his tie for what felt like the 100th time. His reflection looked composed, but his eyes betrayed the weight pressing on his chest. He'd spent his whole career trying to separate the man from the uniform. Today, the two were indistinguishable. On the desk behind him lay 2 documents, the mayor's scripted statement, safe, sterile, full of political varnish, and his own handwritten notes, raw and unpolished. His version wasn't meant to protect the department. It was meant to tell the truth. The TV in the corner buzzed with another news report. The anchor's voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Chief Lawson is expected to address the city in light of the recent police incident involving local resident Henry Lawson." Hearing his father's name out loud, tied to the word incident, felt like a blade twisting in his ribs. He walked out of his office and down the corridor. Every eye turned toward him. Some of his officers stood straight, unsure whether to salute or look away. He could sense their fear, not of him, but of what he might say. At the lobby entrance, Marta handed him an umbrella. "You don't have to do this now," she whispered. "Yes, I do," he said quietly. "If I wait any longer, I'll start lying to myself again." He stepped outside. Rain splashed against the pavement as he approached the line of microphones and cameras. Reporters crowded forward, their voices a blur. Beyond them, the protesters chanted louder. Strangers united under one truth. The system had gone too far. Derek raised his hand for silence. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of generations. "Yesterday, an innocent man was hurt by those sworn to protect him. That man happens to be my father. But that doesn't make this a family matter. It makes it a community one, because every man treated like a suspect without cause could be someone's father, someone's son." The crowd quieted. Even the rain seemed to listen. "This department will not hide behind politics or excuses. There will be accountability. I owe that to my father and to every person who believes justice still means something." For a moment, no one moved. Then applause broke through the silence, hesitant but real. Derek looked toward the horizon. The thunder had faded, leaving only the sound of falling rain. Somewhere across town, in a dim hospital room, Henry Lawson watched the speech on TV. His lips curved slightly, not a full smile, but the start of one. "That's my boy," he whispered. And with that, the storm over Magnolia Falls began to change direction. The sound of the phone cut through the early dawn like a blade. Chief Derek Lawson was still half asleep when his cell buzzed against the nightstand. He groaned, rubbing his eyes. "Lawson." A nervous voice answered. "Chief, there's been an incident. A civilian, older male, African-American. Officers Keats and Barnes were involved." He sat up instantly. "What kind of incident?" A pause. Then the dispatcher said carefully, "Use of force, minor injury, they say, happened on Pine Street." Pine Street. The words echoed. Derek had driven down that street thousands of times, his father's old neighborhood. Something cold spread through his chest. "I'll be there in 10, he said, throwing on his uniform. The police department was quiet when he arrived, but tension hung in the air like smoke after a fire. 2 patrol cars were still parked outside, lights off, windshields speckled with rain. Inside, the officers tried to look busy. Everyone knew what had happened. No one wanted to be the one to mention it first. Marta met him at the door. "Sir, the mayor's office already called. They want your statement by morning. I'll give it when I see the report." "It's on your desk," she said softly. He walked into his office, still pulling at the collar of his shirt. On his desk lay a single-page report. Sterile, lifeless. Suspect failed to comply. Use of pepper spray justified. Derek frowned. "Who wrote this?" Marta hesitated. "Keats." He said the suspect was behaving aggressively. Where's the body cam footage? She handed him a USB drive. Right here, sir. But I think you should watch this alone. He slid it into the computer. The screen flickered, a shaky image, streetlights glowing through drizzle. Then the footage came alive, a man walking down Pine Street, a brown paper bag in his hand. Calm, unarmed. Derek leaned closer. Then came the voices, the commands, the panic, the burst of spray, the fall, the sound of someone coughing, gasping for air. Derek froze. Even through the distortion, he knew that face, the posture, the quiet dignity in the way the man didn't fight back. It wasn't just any civilian. It was Henry Lawson, his father. The room seemed to shrink around him. His breathing quickened. No, he whispered. It can't be. He replayed the video once, twice, but the truth didn't change. He leaned back, pressing a hand over his mouth. The badge on his chest suddenly felt heavier than ever. His father was the man they'd called a suspect. And now, the man in charge of the investigation was his own son. By sunrise, Magnolia Falls was no longer the quiet town it had been yesterday. The video had escaped the department and spread like wildfire, from local Facebook groups to national news networks. Hashtags filled the screen. Justice for Henry, Ding Magnolia, Falls, Incident, another name. Chief Derek Lawson watched from his office as the anchors discussed it in polished, detached voices. The department has not released an official statement. Sources confirm the man in the video is Henry Lawson, 50, a local mechanic. The officers involved are on administrative leave. Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper. He muted the TV. Silence. Then he whispered to himself, "Dad, what were you even doing on Pine Street?" His phone vibrated. Lieutenant Rivas, head of internal affairs. "Chief, we've got a problem. The video's everywhere. Reporters are outside and someone leaked your connection to the victim." Derek froze. "They know." "Yes, sir. Half the town does. The other half's marching in front of the courthouse." Through the blinds, he could already see a crowd forming outside the station. Signs, cameras, umbrellas under the rising sun. The hum of anger carried through the glass. "All right," he said quietly. "Contain it. Keep the officers inside until further notice." But it was too late for containment. The truth had already gone public. He slumped into his chair, hands clasped tight. His mind raced between disbelief and guilt. It didn't feel real. His father, sprayed like a criminal, crying out for air while strangers filmed it. He pulled open his drawer and took out an old photograph, himself at graduation, smiling in his academy blues, standing next to Henry. His father's arm rested proudly on his shoulder. The caption written in pen on the back read, "My son, the man who will make things right." Derek's throat tightened. A knock came at the door. It was Officer Barnes, one of the men from the scene. His uniform looked wrinkled, his face drawn. "Sir, I just wanted to say we didn't know who he was. We thought—" Derek stood, cutting him off. "You thought wrong." Barnes's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Chief." "Sorry doesn't give him back his dignity," Derek snapped. "Get out." Barnes left, shoulders heavy. Derek turned back to the TV. The Chiron now read, "Police Chief's father victim in pepper spray incident." The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A faint, trembling voice came through. "Son, it's me." Derek's breath caught. Henry Lawson was on the line. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and rain-soaked earth, that strange mix of life trying to stay clean. Chief Derek Lawson stood outside room 214 again, phone still in hand, his father's voice echoing in his head from the brief call. "Son, we need to talk." He had barely answered before hanging up, his throat too tight to speak. But now he was here, because silence weighed heavier than fear. He pushed open the door. Henry Lawson sat upright in bed this time, looking stronger. A nurse adjusted his IV line and smiled politely before slipping out. The TV above the bed replayed clips of the protest outside, chanting crowds, flashing signs, the words "Justice for Henry" crawling across the bottom of the screen. When Henry saw Derek, he gave a small nod. "Didn't think you'd come back so soon." Derek's voice was low. "I shouldn't have waited this long in the first place." "Yeah," Henry said quietly. "That's one way to put it." The silence between them was thicker than any argument could have been. Derek stepped closer, eyes scanning the bruises around his father's neck. "They said you resisted." Henry let out a humorless laugh. "Resisted? Son, the only thing I resisted was falling over after they hit me." "Dad," Derek began, shaking his head, I can't believe this happened here. Not in my department." Not under my watch. Henry looked at him calm but sharp. You think I can't believe it happened, son? I've been living this kind of disbelief my whole life. Derek turned away, pacing. No, this is different. This is a mistake. An accident. Keats panicked, that's all. It wasn't... Henry interrupted softly. You still trying to defend them? I'm trying to understand. Understand what? Henry's voice grew firmer. How it feels to have a badge on one side of the line and your skin on the other. That hit hard. Derek stopped pacing. He looked back at his father, eyes wet. You raised me to respect the badge. I raised you to respect people, Derek, Henry replied. The badge was supposed to help you do that. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain tapping against the window. Finally, Henry leaned back, weary. You keep saying this wasn't supposed to happen here, but son, it did. And it's been happening to men like me long before you ever wore that uniform. Derek swallowed hard. I'll fix this, Dad. I swear I will. Henry's eyes softened, though his voice stayed steady. Then stop saying it's not real. Face it. Because until you do, you'll never fix a damn thing. Derek stood still, the truth settling in like cold water. For the first time, denial wasn't enough to protect him anymore. The sound of Derek's boots on the tile floor echoed like gunfire through the hallway. Every officer in the bullpen felt it, the air thick with tension, whispers fading as Chief Derek Lawson entered. His expression was unreadable, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack stone. At the far desk, Officer Ryan Keats looked up. The young cop's face was pale, his eyes darting nervously. He stood, instinctively straightening his posture. Chief, he said quickly, I was going to file another report just to clarify. Derek raised a hand. Sit. Keats obeyed, swallowing hard. The room fell silent. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. Derek walked slowly toward him, his eyes locked on the younger man. You said in your statement that the suspect resisted. Keats nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. He reached into his pocket. I followed training. Training? Derek interrupted, voice low but sharp. You call that training? To blind a man before asking his name? Keats fidgeted. Sir, the call said possible armed suspect. I didn't know who he was. I just didn't know who he was, Derek repeated. You keep saying that like it makes it better. Keats's tone hardened. Chief, with all due respect, this isn't fair. How was I supposed to know he was your father? Derek's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. That's exactly the point. You shouldn't have to know who he was to treat him like a human being. The room went dead quiet. Officers glanced at each other, uneasy. Keats stood abruptly, defensive now. Look, I followed protocol. Everyone's turning me into some kind of monster, but I did my job. Maybe your father shouldn't have... The words stopped in his throat when Derek slammed his hand down on the desk. Papers fluttered to the floor. Finish that sentence, Derek said coldly. Keats froze. His throat bobbed, but no sound came out. Derek stepped closer, his voice a growl. You think my father deserved what you did? Because of the color of his skin? Because you were scared? Keats's voice cracked. I made a mistake. No, Derek said, his tone cutting through the air. You made a choice. He took a deep breath, eyes sweeping the room. Every single person in this department is going to watch that body cam footage again. Not as cops, but as people. And if you still think it was justified, you don't belong here. He turned toward the glass wall, where the reflection of his father's bruised face seemed to stare back at him from memory. Meeting at 0900, he said. Full staff. I'll be speaking publicly after. As Derek walked away, no one moved. Keats sat frozen, the reality of what he'd done finally beginning to sink in. Outside, the chants from the protesters grew louder, no longer just for Henry Lawson, but for something far bigger. The sound of thunder faded, replaced by something gentler, the hum of summer cicadas and the laughter of children playing in the street. Magnolia Falls, 25 years earlier. A younger Derek Lawson, 18 and full of fire, stood in front of a cracked mirror inside his father's modest house. His new police cadet uniform hung slightly loose on his shoulders, the sleeves too long, the badge still shining with newness. In the doorway, Henry Lawson watched quietly, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. His work clothes smelled of oil and iron, like the auto shop that had kept food on their table for years. You look sharp, boy, Henry said, pride softening his tired face. You really think I can do it, Pop? Derek asked, adjusting his collar. Do it? Henry smiled. You already did. You made it out. Derek turned, eyes full of ambition. Not just out. I'm going to change things, Dad. I'm going to make the badge mean something again. Henry chuckled. The badge only means what the man wearing it stands for. For a moment they just looked at each other, father and son, both believing in the same dream, but from different sides of it. Then Derek's expression grew serious. "I promise, Pop, when I wear this uniform I'll make you proud." Henry nodded. "Then remember who you are before you remember what you are." Back in the present, Chief Derek Lawson sat alone in his dark office staring at the same badge from that day, no longer shining, now scratched and dull from years of wear. He turned it over in his hand, the words, "To protect and serve," barely visible under the light. He whispered to himself, "You made a promise." The memories kept coming. His first day on the force, the long nights, the compromises, the way he'd learned to stay quiet during racial profiling complaints, to pick his battles, to survive inside a system that rewarded silence. Every choice he'd made to climb higher in rank had built a wall between him and the man who raised him. And now, the weight of that wall was collapsing. A message pinged on his computer, an email from Internal Affairs. Formal review scheduled. External oversight may be required due to conflict of interest. He read it twice, then closed the laptop slowly. The words blurred behind the tears he refused to shed. The phone buzzed again, a voicemail from his father, left hours earlier. "Son, you don't need to save me. Just do what's right." Derek leaned back, eyes closed. The voice from the past and the voice from the present blended into one, and for the first time in decades, he finally understood what his father had meant that day. Change doesn't start with the badge. It starts with the man wearing it. The late afternoon sun bled through the blinds of room 214, painting thin golden bars across the floor. The faint beep of the heart monitor was the only rhythm in the room. Steady, patient, almost like it was waiting for something to break the silence. Chief Derek Lawson stood in the doorway again, hat in hand. He looked exhausted, not from lack of sleep, but from the kind of fatigue that sits deep inside a man's soul. Henry Lawson was awake, reading an old newspaper someone had left behind. When he saw his son, he folded it neatly and placed it on the nightstand. "Wasn't sure you'd come back," he said. "I almost didn't," Derek admitted, pulling a chair closer. "Didn't think I'd know what to say." Henry smiled faintly. "Talking's never been your problem, son. Listening, that's another story." Derek sighed, settling into the chair. "You always did have a way with words. Words are all a man's got when the world stops listening," Henry replied softly. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, faint chants from protesters drifted through the open window. "Justice for Henry! Justice for Henry!" Derek stared at the sound. "You hear that?" Henry nodded slowly. "I told you one day you'd have to face this." Derek turned to him, confused. "Face what?" "The truth," Henry said plainly. "You wear a badge in a world that sees skin before it sees soul. You can't fix what you pretend ain't there." Derek swallowed hard. "You think I've been pretending?" Henry's eyes softened, but his tone stayed firm. "I think you've been surviving. There's a difference." Derek looked down at his hands, steady on the outside, shaking on the inside. "I thought if I played by their rules, earned their respect, maybe I could change the system from the inside." "And what did that get you?" Henry asked gently. Derek didn't answer. He just looked at his father. The bruises, the cuts, the quiet dignity that no humiliation could erase. Finally, Henry said, "You don't fix a broken house by pretending the walls ain't cracked. You tear down what's rotten and rebuild it right." Derek's eyes glistened. "I failed you, Dad." Henry shook his head. "No, you just forgot what side you were building on." Outside, the crowd's chants grew louder, not angry this time, but hopeful. Henry smiled faintly. "You still got time, son. Just don't waste it defending what broke you." Derek nodded slowly, taking his father's hand, a rare gesture between two men who had always spoken more through silence than words. In that moment, forgiveness wasn't spoken. It was simply understood. Back at the station, the walls felt closer than ever. The same halls where Chief Derek Lawson once walked with pride, now whispered with doubt. The portraits of past chiefs stared down from the wall, stern white faces frozen in time, reminders of the system he'd sworn to reform, but never truly confronted. Derek sat at his desk, the rain streaking the window behind him. His tie was loosened, his shirt collar damp with sweat. He'd just returned from the hospital, and his father's words played over and over in his mind. "You can't fix what you pretend ain't broken." He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, staring at his own reflection in the dark computer screen. "How many times," he whispered, "did I tell myself I was different?" The silence answered him. A knock at the door. It was Lieutenant Rivas, head of Internal Affairs. He stepped in carefully, holding a thick folder. Chief, the mayor's pushing for an expedited review. They want to close this within the week. Derek frowned. Close it? We haven't even started. Rivas sighed. I know, sir. But the city attorney's calling it an isolated incident. They think dragging it out will hurt public trust. Derek laughed bitterly. Public trust? That's been bleeding out on the sidewalk since Pine Street. Rivas hesitated. Sir, if you keep going against them, they'll come after you next. They're already hinting you should step down. Conflict of interest? Emotional bias? I'm biased toward the truth. Derek cut in. Rivas nodded slowly. Then you better be ready to stand alone for it. He left the folder on the desk and quietly walked out. Derek stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside were reports, statements, still frames from the video, each one more unbearable than the last. But what hit him hardest wasn't the paperwork. It was a note clipped to the top, handwritten by Officer Barnes. Sir, I froze. I saw fear where there was none. I'm sorry. Derek closed the folder and leaned back, exhaling shakily. You saw fear, he murmured, because that's what we were taught to see. He looked at the framed photo on the wall, his police academy graduation, Henry's proud face beside him. The memory burned now. Marta knocked gently, peeking in. Sir, the mayor's office keeps calling. He shook his head. Not now. She hesitated. What should I tell them? Derek looked out the rain-streaked window, his reflection half lit by the street lamps. Tell them justice doesn't run on their schedule. When she left, he finally allowed himself to whisper what he'd been avoiding all along. I became part of the thing I swore to change. The badge on his desk gleamed faintly under the light, not a symbol of honor anymore, but of responsibility waiting to be reclaimed. The next morning, Magnolia Falls was surrounded by cameras, satellite vans clogged the streets, and reporters shouted questions over the sound of chanting crowds. What had started as a small-town scandal was now national news. Inside City Hall, the tension was palpable. The conference room smelled of coffee and panic. The blinds were drawn tight, but everyone could still hear the chants echoing from outside. Justice for Henry. Lawson must speak. Mayor Charles Dillard paced at the head of the table, sweat gathering at his temples. We're bleeding credibility here, he snapped. Every hour this story stays alive, it's costing us votes, tourism, donations. City Attorney Linda Carver interrupted, calm but firm. Then we need to control the narrative, Mr. Mayor. We issue a joint statement from the city and the department, calling this an isolated procedural mistake. Promise retraining. Emphasize transparency. Chief Derek Lawson sat quietly across from them, hands clasped on the table. His badge lay in front of him like a burden he wasn't sure he wanted to carry anymore. Transparency, he repeated, his tone dry. You mean we tell them just enough to sound honest, but not enough to be honest? Linda gave a tight smile. Chief, you know how this works. The public doesn't want chaos, they want reassurance. Derek's voice rose. They want truth, and the truth is, one of my officers attacked an innocent man, my father, because of a broken system that punishes compassion and rewards fear. The mayor slammed his palm on the table. Watch your tone, Chief. You're walking a fine line here. Derek leaned forward. The line was crossed when you decided image mattered more than integrity. A long, tense silence followed. Finally, Linda spoke softly. If you go public with this, you'll destroy your career, maybe even the department itself. Is that what you want? Derek took a breath, steady but trembling underneath. If the truth destroys it, maybe it wasn't worth saving. The mayor stared at him, incredulous. You're making a mistake. No, Derek said, standing. I made a mistake years ago, when I thought silence was safer than honesty. He reached for his badge, holding it in his palm. For a second, he considered placing it on the table, walking away, but instead, he slid it back onto his chest, the metal gleaming under the fluorescent light. This isn't over, the mayor warned. I know, Derek replied, heading for the door. That's the point. As he left, the sound of protesters outside grew louder, their chants merging with the rumble of thunder overhead, the same storm that had started this all, now demanding resolution. The fight for justice had officially gone public. That night, Chief Derek Lawson sat alone in his darkened office. The blinds were half open, letting in streaks of blue from the flashing protest lights outside. The rhythmic chant, "Justice for Henry! Justice for Henry!" pulsed like a heartbeat through the glass. The city had become a pressure cooker. The mayor wanted silence, the media wanted statements, and his own officers wanted reassurance that the system would protect them. But Derek knew that protection had always come at a cost. someone else's dignity, someone else's life. On his desk lay two things: a drafted press statement written by City Hall and the internal affairs file with the truth. He opened the file again, staring at the grainy still from the body cam. His father's face contorted in pain, eyes squeezed shut, pepper spray dripping down his cheeks. A caption beneath it read, "Suspect failed to comply." He slammed the folder shut. A knock at the door. Lieutenant Rivas entered quietly. "Sir, it's late. You should go home." Derek looked up, tired. "Home?" "Rivas, my home is out there, burning in the streets." Rivas hesitated. "You've got a choice to make. Either stand with your men or stand against them. You can't do both." Derek's eyes hardened. Standing with them means lying. Standing against them means losing everything. Rivas nodded. "Then you already know your answer." He left without another word, closing the door behind him. Derek exhaled deeply, the sound half sigh, half prayer. His gaze drifted to the wall, to the framed oath he'd signed the day he became chief, to protect and serve, without prejudice or favor. He whispered it under his breath, without prejudice or favor. The words felt hollow now, until he thought of his father's voice. "You can't fix what you pretend ain't broken." That's when the decision began to form, not out of anger, but out of necessity. He pulled out a notepad and began writing his own statement. His handwriting was shaky, but his words were steady. "The truth belongs to the people. I cannot defend a badge that hides behind fear. Justice must be equal, or it's not justice at all." When he finished, he sat back, tears welling in his eyes. Not from weakness, but from clarity. He looked down at his badge, the same one that once made him proud, the same one that had blinded him to what was in front of him. Slowly, he unpinned it from his chest and placed it beside the file. "No more lines," he whispered. "Not between us, not anymore." Outside, the thunder rolled again. Tomorrow he would walk into that press conference not as Chief Lawson, but as Henry Lawson's son. And for the first time in years, that felt right. The morning broke grey and heavy over Magnolia Falls, the kind of sky that warned of rain but held it back, waiting. Outside the police station, hundreds had gathered. Townspeople, reporters, students and strangers from neighboring cities. Signs swayed in the damp air. "Accountability now. Justice has no rank. We stand with Henry." Inside, the lobby buzzed with a quiet electricity. Cameras were being set up, cords taped to the floor, microphones arranged on the podium. It wasn't just a press conference, it was a reckoning. Chief Derek Lawson stood behind the glass doors, watching the sea of umbrellas gather. His suit was pressed, his tie perfect, but his hands trembled slightly. Marta approached, holding a folder. "Sir, the mayor's team sent their final draft for your statement." Derek didn't even look at it. "Put it in the trash." She hesitated. "Are you sure? Once you say what you're planning to—" "I'm not planning anything," he interrupted softly. "I'm telling the truth, that's all." Marta nodded slowly, understanding. "Then I guess it's about time someone did." The department doors opened. The noise outside swelled. Cameras clicked. People shouted his name. Derek stepped up to the podium, the microphone picking up his deep breath. He scanned the crowd and faces expectant, angry, hopeful. Then he began. "For the past week, this city has been torn apart by an act that should never have happened." His voice was steady, his tone measured, but every word carried weight. "An unarmed man was attacked and humiliated by members of this department, the same department I swore to lead with honor. That man is my father, Henry Lawson. But this isn't about family, it's about accountability." A ripple moved through the crowd, gasps, murmurs, the press leaning forward. "For too long, we've measured justice by rank instead of right. We've excused mistakes that cost lives because they were made by people in uniform. But the badge isn't a shield from the truth, it's a promise to face it." He paused, his gaze sweeping the officers standing behind the barricade. "From this day forward, this department will answer for what it's done and what it's allowed. No more silence, no more excuses, because no one, not even me, stands above the truth." The last words hung in the air, cutting through the wind like a bell. For a moment there was no sound, just the weight of the moment settling over everyone. Then the first clap came from somewhere in the back, then another. Within seconds, the crowd erupted, not in chaos, but in raw, unfiltered release. Henry Lawson watched from his hospital room, tears filling his tired eyes. For the first time he saw not just a cop on that podium, but the man he'd raised to do what was right, no matter the cost. 3 days later, The police auditorium was packed to the walls. Reporters filled every seat, their cameras trained on the small wooden table at the center. The city seal behind the podium looked suddenly ironic, its motto integrity and service, carved in brass above the very department now on trial. Chief Derek Lawson entered through the side door. He wasn't wearing his full dress blues today, just a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled, badge clipped to his belt instead of pinned to his chest. The gesture didn't go unnoticed. It said what words could not. I'm not hiding behind the uniform anymore. He took his seat at the table. Across from him sat Officer Ryan Keats and Officer Barnes, their lawyers whispering like buzzards before a storm. To Derek's right, Internal Affairs Director Lieutenant Rivas adjusted the microphone. "This hearing is now in session," he announced. "Chief Lawson has elected to preside personally. The record will reflect that the incident of March 17th, involving Mr. Henry Lawson, is under formal review." A low murmur rippled through the room. Cameras clicked. Derek leaned into the mic. "Before we begin," he said, "I want everyone here to remember something. This isn't about revenge, it's about truth, and the truth deserves a voice." He motioned to Rivas. The lights dimmed slightly, and the body cam footage appeared on the large projection screen. The room fell into silence as the images rolled, the same shaky video that had already circled the nation, the shouts, the pepper spray, Henry's voice muffled by pain. When it ended, the lights came back up. The silence lingered, heavy, suffocating. Derek turned to the officers. "Officer Keats, do you still stand by your statement that Mr. Lawson was resisting?" Keats cleared his throat. "Sir, I was following protocol. I perceived a threat." "Perceived?" Derek repeated softly. "Describe it." Keats hesitated. "He reached into his pocket." "For what?" "I didn't know. You didn't ask." Keats swallowed. "No, sir." Derek's voice stayed calm, but the tremor beneath it carried years of anger held back. "That pocket held a wallet you never let him show, and because of that choice, you turned a walk home into an assault." Barnes shifted uncomfortably, whispering to his attorney. Keats looked down at the table, eyes glassy. Derek continued, "The badge on your chest is supposed to give courage, not fear. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that." He turned to the panel of officers seated behind the press. "Every one of us swore an oath. Today that oath is being measured, not by words, but by what we do next." The room was utterly still. Cameras whirred softly, recording history. Derek folded his hands and said quietly, "Let's proceed." The real reckoning had begun. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above the crowded room. The hum of air conditioning mixed with the restless shuffle of papers, camera clicks and whispered questions. The internal hearing had become the most watched event Magnolia Falls had ever seen, streamed live across social media, broadcast on national TV. Chief Derek Lawson sat tall at the center table, expression carved from stone. But inside he felt every pulse, every breath, every second stretching into eternity. Lieutenant Rivas, acting as the moderator, cleared his throat. "The record will show that both responding officers were equipped with functioning body cameras. Footage from Officer Barnes corroborates key details missing from Officer Keats's original report." A projector flickered to life again. The second video began, a slightly different angle. The crowd held its breath. Barnes's camera captured what Keats's hadn't. Henry Lawson, calm, with both hands visible, speaking softly. His voice was steady. "I live 2 blocks away, officer. I'm just walking home." Then came the blur of motion, Keats stepping forward, shouting commands over him, and the sudden spray of orange mist. Gasps rippled through the audience. Henry's voice, coughing, echoed through the speakers. "Please, I can't breathe." When the clip ended, Derek's hands trembled under the table. He forced them still. Rivas turned toward Keats. "Officer, do you deny this footage contradicts your earlier statement?" Keats swallowed. "No, sir." "Did you file an accurate report?" A pause, then softly, "No, sir." Murmurs broke out across the room. Cameras zoomed in on his face, sweat beading at his temple. Rivas looked to Derek. "Chief Lawson, your questions." Derek stood, his voice steady, but charged with restrained pain. "Officer Keats, when you joined this department, what did you swear to protect?" "Lives, sir." "Did you protect a life that night?" Keats hesitated. "No, sir." "Did you try?" Keats's jaw trembled. I thought I was." Derek's eyes softened slightly, not with sympathy but understanding. "That's the problem, son. You thought fear was duty. You thought authority made you right. But the truth is, it made you blind." Keats's gaze dropped. Barnes looked down, tears gathering in his eyes. Derek turned to the room. This hearing isn't about two bad officers. It's about a system that teaches men to see threat where there is none. That's the real crime. Silence fell again. Even the reporters stopped typing. Henry Lawson's attorney, sitting quietly in the front row, nodded once, a gesture of respect. For the first time, the crowd outside began chanting something new. It wasn't anger this time. It was resolve, truth, justice, change. Inside, Derek inhaled deeply. He knew the next step would cost him everything, but it would also set something free. The air inside the auditorium was electric, the kind of tension that hummed through skin. Reporters whispered into microphones. Officers shifted in their seats. Then the back doors opened and a small entourage swept in like a gust of cold wind. Mayor Charles Dillard led the group, flanked by City Attorney Linda Carver and two aides in grey suits. Every camera turned. The mayor's smile was thin, polished for television. He strode straight to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice dripping authority, "this hearing has gone far enough. The situation has escalated beyond our control and is now threatening public safety. Chief Lawson's presence here is no longer appropriate given his personal involvement." Gasps rippled across the room. Derek didn't move. His fingers tapped once on the table. Slow, deliberate. Linda added smoothly, "Per legal counsel, the chief is ordered to step aside pending external review." She slid a printed order across the table toward him, the city seal embossed at the top like a commandment. Derek looked down at it, then back up at her. "Is this what integrity looks like now, paperwork and silence?" The mayor stiffened. "This is about procedure, Chief, not drama." "No," Derek said quietly, standing. "This is about courage, and you lost yours the moment a camera turned on." The crowd murmured. Flashes popped. The mayor leaned closer, voice low but caught by a microphone. "You'll regret this." Derek met his eyes. "I already do." He turned toward the press. "Ladies and gentlemen, the city wants to end this hearing because the truth hurts their image. But this isn't about image. It's about a man who was blinded on the street for walking while black. It's about a system that trains good officers to be afraid of the people they swore to protect." The room erupted in noise, cheers, claps, shouts. The mayor tried to speak, but his voice was drowned out. Derek raised his hand for quiet. "You can remove me from my position," he said, "but you can't remove the truth from this room. Every word, every frame of that video is already out there. You can't hide it anymore." He tore the suspension notice in half, the sound crisp through the microphones. Reporters surged forward shouting questions. Marta, standing near the back, wiped a tear from her eye. She whispered to no one in particular. He finally did it. Derek looked around one last time, at his officers, at the journalists, at the empty seat where his father would have sat if he could. "I won't serve silence," he said simply. "Not today. Not ever again." As he walked out, cameras followed. Outside, the crowd roared, not in chaos but in unity. Magnolia Falls had never sounded so awake. The night after the hearing, Magnolia Falls felt like a city holding its breath. Rain misted across the courthouse steps where candles now flickered, silent witnesses for the wounded truth. Inside his dim office, Derek Lawson packed a small cardboard box, framed photos, old commendations, a medal for excellence in service. The irony stung. Each plaque felt heavier than it should, like it was carved from guilt. He was almost done when Marta appeared in the doorway, clutching a flash drive. "Sir," she whispered, glancing down the hall to be sure they were alone. "You need to see this before you leave." Derek frowned. "What is it?" "Internal Affairs archives. Complaints that were sealed. Pattern of use of force reports buried by previous chiefs, including Barnes and Keats." He froze. "How many?" She swallowed. 11. All dismissed. Same excuse every time. Suspect resisted. Derek took the drive with shaking hands. "You're sure this is real?" "I copied it from the restricted server before they locked you out. They'll delete it by morning." He stared at her. Equal parts gratitude and sorrow. "You realize if this goes public you'll lose your job." Marta smiled faintly. "Then I'll finally sleep at night." An hour later, the newsroom lights of WMTX Channel 7 glared against the rain-slick windows as Derek stepped inside. The receptionist stammered. She knew his face from every broadcast. "I need to speak to your news director," he said. "It can't wait." Minutes later, he sat across from a journalist named Evelyn Park, her recorder blinking red between them. "What's this about, Chief?" she asked. Derek slid the flash drive across the table. "It's not Chief anymore, and it's about the truth." She hesitated. You understand publishing classified records is... I understand my silence already hurt enough people. I'm done protecting rot. He leaned forward, voice steady but full of ache. This isn't just about my father. It's about every file that ended the same way, every complaint no one read, every voice that died in a drawer labeled resolved. You wanted proof of systemic failure? Here it is. Evelyn studied him, then nodded. If what's in here is real, this city's never going to be the same. That's the idea, Derek said softly. By dawn, the story hit every major outlet. Leaked records reveal pattern of police abuse in Magnolia Falls. The footage of Henry Lawson's assault, played side by side with internal memos, each one stamped, "No disciplinary action." In hospital room 214, Henry turned toward the TV, eyes wet. "He did it," he whispered. "He really did it." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, but this time it sounded like applause. By sunrise, Magnolia Falls wasn't just a town on the map. It was the epicenter of a storm that had reached every screen in America. News helicopters hovered over the city, their rotors humming above waves of protesters filling Main Street. National anchors broadcast live from in front of the courthouse, their voices solemn, almost reverent. This small southern town has become a symbol tonight of truth, accountability, and one man's decision to break the silence from within. Headlines flooded the internet. Chief exposes own department's secrets. The son who chose justice over loyalty. The files that changed Magnolia Falls forever. For the first time, Derek wasn't hiding behind the badge, and neither was the truth. At Rosie's diner, where Henry used to buy his nightly fried chicken, the regulars huddled around a small TV bolted to the wall. Rosie herself wiped a tear from her cheek. "That boy finally did what this town's been afraid to do for 50 years, she said softly. At the high school, a teacher paused her civics class so her students could watch the broadcast. One kid raised his hand and whispered, "That's my cousin's shop in the background, that's where it happened." At the police station, the mood was divided. Some officers sat in stunned silence. Others stared at their phones, anger rising behind clenched jaws. Officer Barnes sat alone at his desk, his hands shaking. He whispered a quiet prayer, "God forgive me." In Washington, senators referenced the case on the floor. Civil rights leaders called for federal oversight. Churches held candlelight vigils. Hashtags trended worldwide. And through it all, one image dominated social media, a photo snapped from the courthouse steps. Derek Lawson standing in the rain with no umbrella, facing the crowd, his badge in his hand. Underneath, someone had written, "He gave up power to give us truth." Meanwhile, at Magnolia General Hospital, Henry Lawson watched from his bed, the glow of the television reflecting in his tired eyes. The nurse turned down the volume, but he shook his head. "Leave it," he said quietly. "I've waited my whole life to hear this noise." The news anchor's voice echoed through the room. "The Department of Justice has announced a federal inquiry into the Magnolia Falls Police Department following the release of sealed records by former Chief Derek Lawson." Henry leaned back, smiling faintly. "My son," he whispered. He finally saw the world for what it is, and didn't look away. Outside, thunder rolled again, not angry this time, but deep and distant, like the sound of something beginning to change. 2 days after the leak, Magnolia Falls Police Headquarters no longer felt like a place of order. The corridors buzzed with whispered arguments, slammed doors, and the uneasy hum of betrayal. Chief Derek Lawson's office, or what was left of it, sat stripped bare. His nameplate was gone, his uniform turned in. Still, he came back every morning, not to lead but to stand accountable. He refused to hide. When he walked through the main floor, conversations stopped. Some officers looked away, others glared openly. And then there were the few who nodded, quietly, with something that almost looked like respect. Lieutenant Rivas met him near the evidence room. "You shouldn't be here," he warned. "I know," Derek said. "That's why I came." Rivas lowered his voice. "Half the department's furious. They think you sold them out." "I told the truth," Derek replied. "If the truth feels like betrayal, maybe we were loyal to the wrong thing." Rivas sighed. "It's not that simple, Derek. Some of these guys, they built their whole lives on believing the system protected them." "And it did," Derek said softly. "Just not the people it was supposed to protect." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the echo of distant chatter and ringing phones. In the locker room downstairs, Officer Keats sat on a bench staring at his boots. The other officers were whispering about him now, not because of what he'd done, but because of what it meant. Man, Lawson threw us under the bus, one muttered. Now the feds are crawling all over us. Another replied, maybe that's what needed to happen. Keats looked up. He didn't throw us under. He made us look in a mirror. Silence. No one replied. That same afternoon, Derek attended a mandatory city meeting. The mayor didn't look at him. The city attorney spoke in circles, calling his actions reckless but courageous, trying to spin heroism into liability. When it was over, a few officers approached him outside, men who'd never dared speak openly before. One of them, Sergeant Alvarez, said quietly, "My brother got beat up by cops in Baton Rouge when I was 16. I joined the force thinking I could change it. You just reminded me why I tried." Derek looked at him, tired, grateful. "Then don't stop now." Alvarez nodded once. "Neither should you." As Derek walked away, the sound of division echoed behind him, a house cracking, but maybe, finally, rebuilding. Outside, protesters held candles instead of signs. The crowd wasn't angry anymore. It was awake. The hospital had grown quieter over the past few days. The chants outside had faded into conversations, the sirens into soft rain. Inside room 214, the air was calm again, a rare peace in Magnolia Falls. Henry Lawson sat up in bed, a blanket draped over his legs. The bruises on his face had turned to pale yellow, fading like the storm that had passed. The TV in the corner was off for once. He didn't need to watch the news anymore, he'd lived it. A gentle knock came at the door. "Come in," Henry said, his voice steadier now. Derek Lawson stepped in, not in uniform this time, just jeans, a grey shirt and tired eyes that carried the weight of everything that had happened. He stood there for a moment, unsure whether to speak or kneel or just breathe. Henry broke the silence first. "You look more like my son and less like a badge today." Derek smiled faintly. "That's a compliment, right?" Henry chuckled softly. "Depends on the day." Derek walked closer, pulling a chair beside the bed. "You were right," he said quietly, "about everything. I spent my whole life thinking I could change the system from the inside, but I didn't realize it was changing me faster." Henry studied him, eyes soft but firm. "Took you long enough to figure that out." "I should have listened sooner," Derek admitted. "All those years I spent trying to make you proud, and all you wanted was for me to stay human." Henry's hand trembled slightly as he reached out and rested it on his son's arm. "Son, I was always proud, even when you got lost in the noise, because I knew one day the truth would find you." Derek looked down, his throat tightening. "I'm sorry, Dad, for the years I stayed away, for letting silence do the talking." Henry nodded. "Silence is easy. Courage is loud. You finally found yours." They sat together in the quiet. No cameras, no reporters, no flashing lights. Just two men who'd been separated by the world's noise and reconnected by its storm. Henry's gaze moved to the window. Outside, the sun was finally breaking through the grey clouds. "You see that?" he said. "That's what comes after the rain." Derek followed his eyes, smiling. "Yeah, feels different this time." Henry leaned back, his voice barely above a whisper. "Keep it that way." As Derek stood to leave, Henry called out softly, "Hey, son?" "Yeah?" Henry smiled, weary but proud. "You finally made the badge mean something again." Derek's eyes glistened. "No, Dad. You did." For the first time in years, the Lawson men shared something that needed no apology: peace. Spring came early that year to Magnolia Falls. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings, the kind of scent that makes a town remember how to breathe again. At the edge of the police headquarters lawn, a small crowd gathered under the morning sun. Reporters were there, yes, but so were children, teachers, nurses, and neighbors. The same faces that once shouted in anger now stood together in quiet unity. A new sign gleamed in front of the building. The old motto, "Integrity and Service," had been replaced with something simpler: "Truth lives here." In the center of it all, Derek Lawson knelt beside his father. Henry sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket, his eyes bright with pride. Before them, a young cadet handed Derek a small oak sapling. "This tree," Derek said to the crowd, "will stand where my father once fell." He pressed the roots into the soil, his hands steady, deliberate. The sound of shovels filled the silence, as officers, old and new, joined him one by one. For once, rank didn't matter. Every hand worked the same ground. When the hole was filled, Derek stood, brushing the dirt from his palms. He turned to the crowd, the sun lighting his face. "We used to think justice was a badge," he began, "that it was something you wore, but it's not. Justice is something you do, even when it costs you." He looked toward the hospital window visible in the distance. Room 214. My father taught me that you can't fix what you refuse to face. And now Magnolia Falls is finally facing itself. The crowd was silent, some wiping tears. Henry's hand trembled slightly, resting on the armrest of his chair, his voice soft but sure. Took a while, but we got there. Derek smiled. Yeah, we did. A breeze rolled through, rustling the young oak's leaves. The sunlight caught them, golden and alive, a symbol of growth, fragile but strong. Marta stepped forward, camera in hand, snapping a photo of the moment. Father and son beside the new tree, surrounded by their community. Weeks later, that photo would hang in the lobby of the police department, not as propaganda but as a promise. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Planted in the name of truth by those brave enough to tell it." As the crowd began to disperse, Henry looked up at his son one last time. "You did good, boy," he whispered. Derek nodded, voice thick with emotion. "We both did." And as they stood beneath the sunlight, the town reborn, the storm finally passed, the world seemed to agree.